To pay David Njoku or not to pay David Njoku? That is the question, and we'll answer it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Should the Browns pay David Njoku before the season starts, or does he have to earn it as with his play this year? How Quinshon Judkins' legal troubles will impact the unsigned rookie's contract, and the offensive line is our next preview for coming up here before training camp. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And of course, to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And the Browns do have a big question on their hands when it comes to star tight end David Njoku, Pro Bowler from a couple years ago, but took a step back last season, partially due to injury. And I do think that that is some important context in this conversation, is that last year he did not look like himself. He just did not look like the same player. Obviously, we know in 2023, a lot of those numbers that helped him become a Pro Bowler came with Joe Flacco in that 5-game stretch. That's just the truth of it. But I think David Njoku has always been a productive player. We know his story when it comes to becoming one of the better blocking tight ends in the NFL, and the fact that he, embraced that. It took some time for him to embrace that role on this team, but he eventually got there. And I do think he does hold that crown as he's up there in terms of being one of the best pass blocking or just run blocking in general tight ends in this game. And I think that's awesome. I think that actually adds to his value. Like, everyone wants to see the stats from the tight ends that are scoring touchdowns and going downfield and catching passes, but you can't forget about the fact that you have a guy that also is a major factor in the ground game and what this team wants to do. And in a season coming up here with Kevin Stefanski's offense going back to sort of its original form and in the way that it's normally the truest, purest form of what it's supposed to be, having a tight end like that can do those things is immensely valuable. So I think David Njoku is certainly worth what he got paid initially. I think I think largely he's lived up to that contract. And last year he did take a step back. That is factual. And so as we get to this year, in terms of him trying to earn that next contract, I understand where there might be a jump to pay him because he's David Njoku, because he is I think I would call David Njoku a fan favorite at this point. He talks glowingly about Cleveland, how much he loves it here, the fact that he's basically grown into a man here. He speaks very highly of the city. He's one of those gets Cleveland guys at this point, and fans love him. He's, after they win the game against the Jets a couple years ago on Thursday Night Football, he's in the Muni lot drinking with fans. Like, it's that type of stuff that really endears him to the city. And I do think he still is a good player. Do I think he's worthy of a third contract, though, is the big question. And I do think that if I'm talking about trying to pay David Njoku this year before the season starts, or if he has to sort of earn it, I'm in the latter bucket there. I think you have to let it play out this season and see what he does, see what he brings to the table. I'm not going to pay him until I see him stay healthy, frankly. It's the hard truth of it. He has to bounce back. He has to prove that he can still play at that high level. Otherwise, I don't know that it's worth giving him that contract extension just yet, especially when you just drafted in this year's draft Harold Fannin Jr., who on some level they view as their tight end of the future. Now, he's not quite the same stature as Njoku. He's going to have to sort of bulk up here a little bit to be more of a factor as a blocker. And I'm actually excited to see how David Njoku essentially or ideally takes him under his wing and helps sort of navigate his his, his future and help him become a better tight end in certain areas that maybe he's not quite as good. We know he's a great pass catcher, Harold Fannin Jr. at this point. We saw that on full display in college. At the Texas A&M game stands out. The Penn State game stands out. Like, he was brilliant in that phase of the game. But getting him to be a blocker is pivotal, especially if he's going to be a part of Kevin Stefanski's offense this year and years to come. Like, they need him to do that. So it's nice that you have Njoku right now to sort of nurture him and be that inline guy. But helping Harold Fannin get there is going to be, I think, something that he's kind of tasked with as well, even if he does kind of become his replacement. So that will be interesting to watch play out. But I don't know that, even though David Njoku is a fan favorite and all those things, and even though he was a Pro Bowler just a couple seasons ago, I think he needs a bounce back season in a big way to earn that next contract. And here's the other thing. It's not the end of the world. It's not the most far-fetched thing ever, or the craziest idea, to let him play out this season and then see if, maybe you just franchise tag him. I think the number for tight ends for the franchise tag is like 12 million. Like, it's really not like a back-breaking figure. And so, and in that respect, like, you can get away with doing something like that, where you let him play it out if he has a good season and maybe earns that contract. But if you're still hesitant to pay him because of the fact that, I mean, let's just face it, he's 29 years old. He'll be 30 going into the next season, and the Browns have been hesitant to pay guys around that age before. Just look back at last year with what happened with Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper was going into his age 29 season. The Browns were sort of hesitant to pay him. They didn't want to be the ones to do it. And then he turned 30 before the season started. And you have a guy who obviously had a down year just in general last year. And now he's going into his age 31 season. So like they prioritize getting younger at that position, which is why they traded for Jerry Jeudy last offseason, which is why they were linked to Brandon Ayuk trades last offseason. They didn't want to pay a guy who was at that sort of that number, that age, because that is, I don't want to say it's a kiss of death, but it's where you start to see the deterioration happen. And I understood the hesitancy to do it. I can imagine they feel the same way with David Njoku, who's been injury prone as well throughout his career, especially last season, to not want to just pay him blindly because they like him and he's been a good sport and he's, been an important piece for this team in recent years. They got to be smart about this. And so I think that thought process kind of comes into play here as they consider what they're going to do with his contract. So their hesitancy to pay guys at that age, I think, makes a lot of sense and is a big factor in why they haven't done it yet. And I think they will go into the season letting him sort of play it out and then decide if he's earned a third contract with this team. And my guess is he'll probably end up not getting it. But I could see them franchise tagging him and going from there. And I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves here. When you have Harold Fannin Jr. in the building, I feel like that's kind of an indication that they are moving forward with him as their tight end of the future. And that's part of the reason why they drafted him. And so we'll see what all plays out. But the franchise tag is not a bad idea. Like I said, it's a way to sort of prolong your relationship with Njoku if he has a bounce back season, but certainly leaning towards he's got to earn it. I'm not just giving him that contract. And I know there were conversations had this offseason. We know that when the Browns went to watch Cam Ward down in Miami, they met with David Njoku and his representatives. So there were conversations had at one point. Maybe they're still ongoing. But I think you let David Njoku play this season on the last year of his deal, see if he can earn that next extension, and then we talk about it next offseason. And it's a good problem to have, rather than just blindly paying him now and then hoping for the best and hoping he can stay healthy. I think he has to have that bounce back year, which I have talked about obviously already, the fact that he's one of those top guys on the list of guys who need a bounce back year. A notable wrinkle in the Quinshon Judkins situation that you should be paying attention to. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting for our concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot in the queue for a show that you've been dying to go to. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as you get closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Last year, I went to Game Time for the first time. I bought tickets for my wife and I to go see Ohio State, Michigan. The results of the game, yes, unfortunate, but we do get to say that we saw the eventual national champions in person. And with the transparent pricing and panoramic seat views, Game Time instantly became my go-to app for buying tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms may apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so we talked a lot about the Quinshon Judkins situation yesterday, how there is still a lot that has to play out legally. The official police report was shared, and there were some pretty graphic details of what actually went on. Sounds like the incident happened in his car, and we know that it did take 5 days for an actual report to be filed, and then Quinshon Judkins to be arrested. So again, legal process has to play out. We know that the Browns will certainly have a similar stance on that. When Kevin Stefanski gets asked about it, it's guaranteed to be one of, if not the first question that Kevin Stefanski gets asked about when training camp commences next Wednesday. So get ready for that. And we know what his answer is going to be. It'll be what I just told you right here. But there is an interesting with Quinshon and his legal now troubles, his legal issue where it comes into play in regards to his contract. So I want to be clear about this because people have been bringing up, like, I thought rookie contracts were already slotted at a certain figure. And yes, that is correct. There are certain numbers that are just awarded to based off the NFLPA, negotiations for the CBA. They are given to certain draft slots. So as the number 36 pick in the draft, Quinshon has a certain number that he can make off rip. But the guarantees in those contracts and some of the other language, oftentimes there's offset language in contracts and things like those are the things that still get negotiated between a rep and a rookie's rep and the team when they are drafted. And so those are the things that have sort of been playing out somewhat publicly, I think, across the NFL, because Quinshon is one of 30 second-round picks that has gone unsigned to this point. And we know that the Chargers have a situation on their hands where they already reported, obviously, because they're playing in the Hall of Fame game, and Trey Harris, their rookie second round pick, he isn't showing up because he hasn't finalized his contract yet. So, and this all stems from and by the way, Carson Schlesinger is one of the only two second round picks in this year's draft that has signed to their respective team. And the reason he signed, there's 30 guys who aren't, is because this new trend in the NFL is that the second round pick guys want all their money fully guaranteed. And in the past, teams haven't been so keen to do that, but it seems like that's a new trend. Teams are starting to do it more. There's the two guys that are signed, including Schlesinger, as I said, do have those full guarantees now in their contract. And so Quinshon Judkins is basically trying to negotiate something similar in his deal, as are a lot of these other rookies, including Trey Harris, who didn't show up for the Chargers last week and is basically a holdout as a rookie. And so this is this new sort of phenomenon, this new trend in the NFL that guys are asking for this, guys are looking for this. But the reason it creates this interesting now wrinkle in this entire situation is like, listen, in the past, like guys like Mike Hall Jr., his situation came up in August. He had already signed his contract at that point. And so on like for the Browns last year. And so I understand where, you kind of live with the consequences at that point once they're sort of locked in. But because Quinshon's held out this long in terms of getting his deal signed, and because they don't have a deal finalized, now you're talking about like showing up to training camp. Would he have not shown up if his deal wasn't done next week anyway? If his deal like now you have maybe multiple reasons why he's not showing up, right? Because he's in this legal trouble now that he's going to have to sort of deal with down in Florida. And what does that sort of mean for his arrival to camp this really later this week? Because Friday is the day the rookies are supposed to report for the Browns. So it's all very interesting. But the contract part of this is maybe the most fascinating because, I mean, aside from obviously if he gets a suspension or he's given any sort of discipline from the league, I know that's what you as a fan care about the most. But the contract part of this is worth paying attention to because now you're talking about maybe he was thinking he could negotiate a fully guaranteed deal. But I would guess, listen, I know the Browns haven't been great about establishing like they're okay. They've shown you they're okay taking guys that have had legal issues and trying to sort of transform them or get them on the right path. They have not been hesitant about that. And Quinshon didn't come with any of that stuff, as I said yesterday. So it's not like they saw this coming. But now that it's on the radar, now that it's something that he has to own and is part of his story, I'm going to guess like that becomes a negotiating tactic and that becomes something that they use against him. Like, hey, listen, we would have talked about fully guaranteed, but I don't know if we can, like, can we trust you? Can we trust you now that this is part of your story and now that this is kind of on the docket here, another year where we have to deal with an arrest for a domestic violence incident and the repercussions potentially of that as the legal process still plays out, of course. But I wonder what that means in terms of the guaranteed money that he's going to get and all those different things, especially if he is going to face a suspension at some point here. So the finances of this are an interesting wrinkle sort of behind the scenes that I think is fascinating. And I know from a fan standpoint, probably less so because the money of all this stuff kind of gets lost in the weeds at times. But I do think it's something that is going to take it's going to become a focus of this entire situation because he doesn't have that contract negotiated yet and he hasn't signed it. So we'll see what all that looks like. We'll see how all that plays out. I also think too, like I said it yesterday, it's hard to blame Andrew Berry for, this situation. I understand there's previous incidents where he drafted a guy that had off the field issues. And so those things then trickled into their NFL career. And it was like, well, why do they don't care about character concerns? Why is that the case? Like, why does Andrew Berry keep doing this? It's like bashing your head against a wall. But in this instance, there was nothing bad said about Quinshon Judkins. The only thing I will say, and I think this is kind of an interesting perspective, the Browns have been so coy and so loose with their concerns with guys with off the field issues that the culture that they've set, like there's no second guessing, right? Like if Mike Hall had been released, and I'm not saying they were going to do it, he was a second round pick, I get it, but if they had established at some point along the way, like this is us taking a stand against guys who have character issues, maybe that prohibits players like Quinshon Judkins who get in certain situations from doing it down the line. Like they've shown you that there's no repercussions other than you get whatever your league suspension is and we keep it moving. They don't have any like internal, it doesn't, at least publicly, they don't have any like internal optics in terms of like repercussions for these types of incidents. And so maybe the losing out on guaranteed money will be that thing for Quinshon finally, and there'll be something there because he waited this long, but that's like a one-off. That's like a rare situation where guys aren't signed and they have to deal with this now. So I don't know, like maybe that's the one thing you can blame Andrew Berry for, is that at this point, like his culture is, we don't care about your character concerns, come one, come all, and we will pay you no matter what. And so that's where I think the financial part of this also comes into play and is an interesting thing to follow, because if this ends with them still fully guaranteeing him his contract, it just speaks to that further, that they don't care about character concerns. On some level, you can't always, because I get it, you got to build a football team, but at the same time, when that's what your team is built is ultimately, when you have a team that has so many issues at some point, like then you start to question like culture and you start to question some of those internal things, and the like you do need guys with, you can't have just a whole bunch of problem children in your locker room at any given time. Like at some point, you need some of those leaders and guys who are going to do things the right way. And I do think the Browns have a pretty fair balance of that. Like there's always going to be guys who get in trouble, but it's no surprise on some level that every year, this time of year, you get another story like this, when the precedent that's been set here within the organization is we don't we just let the legal process play out and you'll get that punishment, but we have no repercussions for these incidents, essentially. And again, legal process, all those things, we're not going to cast judgment, but I do think it's interesting as people try to cast judgment on Andrew Berry for making this pick. I'm not saying he made a bad choice, because again, resoundingly, Quinshon was viewed as a stand-up citizen. But then you start to see the trends here within the Browns organization. It's like, well, when you don't have any repercussions or recourse for things that do go wrong off the field, it's easy to see why these things also keep happening from guys within your own locker room. If they can stay healthy, the Browns O-line has an opportunity to return to being one of the best in football. We'll preview it next, coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, we got our next training camp preview for you. We did quarterbacks on Monday. We're doing offensive line here on Tuesday. We'll keep on sticking with the offensive side of the ball largely throughout the week, but we're going to have to sort of work in some defense as well. And I got to say, this offensive line group is one of the most intriguing positions on this team this season, because going back to the basics of Kevin Stefanski's offense, I think opens them up to returning to being one of the most dominant groups in the NFL. I wholeheartedly believe that. Like, they could really get back to running the football very, very effectively, with or without Quinshon Judkins, depending on if he faces a suspension, obviously. I think they can get back to being recognized as one of the more stout units in the game, with guys like Jack Conklin, guys like Joel Bitonio, guys like Wyatt Teller. The biggest factor, of course, is health. This is an offensive line that's older now. This is an offensive line that has been banged up the last couple seasons, most notably Jack Conklin and probably Dewand Jones as well, even though he's on the younger side of this group and he's really the youngest guy of the starters. Like, that's the biggest thing. If health is going to hinder this group, if they're going to go deal with a bunch of injuries, then they probably don't return to form. But if they can stay healthy, if you can get a full season out of Jack Conklin, who, by the way, is now playing in a contract year because the way they restructured and redid his contract, then that's a huge win for this team. And I think it pays dividends in terms of their ability to have an effective offense this year if he stays healthy as well. Same thing goes for Wyatt Teller. Same thing goes with Joe Bitonio, who's probably playing in arguably the last year of his career anyway. Like, those guys all have to stay healthy, and then we'll see how it kind of plays out from there. But like, when you look at from tackle to tackle, the biggest question mark obviously is Dewand Jones. Can he hold his own at that left tackle spot? I'll talk about that more here in a second. But from Bitonio at left guard across, you feel pretty good about those four guys to all the way to Conklin, because you've seen them do this at a high level, especially in this system, in this offense that they're going to be running under Kevin Stefanski, and that they're getting back to when this team was at its best, when this team was its most effective. That unit was just thriving at another level, and they were considered resoundingly across the league as one of the best offensive line groups in the entire NFL. Now, the biggest question is going to be depth with this group, because I really like the Cornelius Lucas signing. I think that was a pretty savvy move, a pretty savvy addition by Andrew Berry. He can play multiple places along the offensive line. He's a swing tackle. He's played both sides. I've gone back and watched some of his tape. We know the PFF grades obviously are out there as well. He has been a steady presence last year, I felt, for the Commanders, filling in at left tackle last year. So I feel really good about the Cornelius Lucas signing. I like that one. Tevin Jenkins is another guy who's versatile. He's played center. He's played guard. He's played some tackle. Like, he can do a lot of different things. So from that standpoint, like, I think the two guys that you brought in this offseason offer some depth. But behind them, there's not a lot really there, and there's a lot of questions. And Zach Zinter maybe is chief among the guys who I'm fascinated to watch during camp, because he had some ups and downs last year, as many rookies do. I'm not saying that that's abnormal or anything, but I think you should be looking for Zach Zinter to sort of take a step or show you something and stand out a little bit in camp, especially when he's going to be getting a lot more reps than he probably will during the regular season, assuming health is not a huge issue. Because if this is the end for Joel Bitonio, if this is his swan song season, Zach Zinter is going to be your next man up at that spot, that left guard spot. And you got to see something from him that incites some confidence that position is going to be okay, even when Joel Bitonio is no longer here and part of the team and retires. Because he's not going to, even if he comes back like one more year, you're basically year to year with Joel Bitonio at this point, whether he retires at the end of the season or not. So Zinter is somebody who needs to take a big leap. And then the other big one, and really the emergence of Dewand Jones as the potential starting left tackle is maybe the most important outcome that can come from this offensive line this season. Zinter is important, but interior offensive line guys are never as important. They are important, but never as important as like the outside guys, your tackles, especially your left tackle. And so Dewand Jones may be emerging as your left tackle of the future. Could be one of the most important things that comes out of this season if it happens. And if it doesn't, but you still see him play well, you could gain some confidence one way or another that Jones can still be part of this offensive line moving forward. It might just be, hey, we move him back to the right side once Jack Conklin's gone, assuming he doesn't return next year. And then you still have to find your left tackle. But that spot alone is going to set the tone for how like this team's future in 2026 from on a number of fronts. Because here's the outcomes. Dewand Jones maybe plays great at left tackle, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, we got our left tackle now. He stays healthy. That's the other big thing for him. But I already mentioned health as in general for this offensive line being an important piece. But if he stays healthy, he holds his own at left tackle. He looks good. All of a sudden it's like, okay, that's not necessarily a massive need for us. We feel okay. Like we have a guy here that can cement that spot for the time being and for the foreseeable future. So maybe that's not as high of a priority for you, and you can address other areas of the offensive line next year with draft picks or whatever. If you realize he can't maybe hold it down on the left side, you move him back to the right side. Maybe he still stays healthy. You move him back to the right side, but then you do need that left tackle spot filled, and you likely go in the draft next year and try to find that guy. And then, or if he completely flops and gets hurt or whatever, then maybe you need to start thinking about, we need tackles for both sides of this offensive line, because Dawand in year 3 can't stay healthy, and we're a little bit worried about that. And so we don't have either of those spots really figured out beyond this season when guys are playing on like the last year of their deals. So that is like that position alone, Dewand Jones solely is kind of this key to unlocking answers to a number of offensive line questions this team is going to have for their future in 2026 and beyond. And so we'll all be paying very close attention, I'm sure, to how he looks in training camp, what he brings to the table, how he looks throughout the season, and whether or not he can emerge as a future piece of this offensive line, or if it's going to be another injury-riddled season for him and the Browns maybe have to pivot another direction at both tackle spots. So again, a lot of potential to get back to dominance there if health, isn't something that derails them. But that left tackle spot is probably, and Dewand Jones is probably one of the biggest storylines for this team now, but throughout the season. That gets overshadowed, obviously, by the quarterback conversation, but it's an important one that we'll all have to pay very, very close attention to. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound, and thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure Locked On Browns is your first listen every single day. We got more position group previews coming up this week. Also tomorrow, Wednesday, is the day. Locked On Network is dropping their top 100 players that we, the hosts, voted on. I told you on Monday, I made sure I put Jerry Jeudy in my top 100. Will he make the cut here at the Locked On Top 100? We'll find out tomorrow, and we'll certainly react and discuss it. For your second listen, head on over to Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being on every day here at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See ya.